True crime. Nameless and mostly harmless. The story of the tourist who remained unidentified for 2 years after the state. The mysterious traveler gave a false name, didn't use a phone, and quoted the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He died of starvation in a tent near civilization. In July 2018, two hikers in the Big Cypress National Park in Florida came across a yellow tent containing the emaciated body of an unknown man. According to one of the hikers, the man's eyes were wide open and his body was twisted. It later turned out that his fingerprints, DNA, and even photographs were not in any database. Thus began one of the most mysterious and sad stories about missing hikers in recent years. Thousands of social media users tried to establish the identity of the man from the yellow tent for 2 years. When the deceased was finally identified, it turned out that he was a strange and scary person, and his death, apparently, was painful. Body in a yellow tent. The body was found by tourists Nicholas Orton and Logan Ball. They noticed an unpleasant smell coming from a tent located away from the general campsite. The travelers called out to the owner. No one answered, and then they decided to look inside. The deceased looked to be between 35 and 50 years old. The body was emaciated, with a height of 175 centimeters. The man weighed less than 40 kilograms. The autopsy showed clear signs of starvation. Pathologists did not find any fatal diseases or symptoms of alcohol or drug use. There was a large old scar on the deceased's stomach, but it clearly could not have been the cause of death. Food and water were found near the body, as well as $3,600 in cash. Later, many compared the mysterious tourist to Chris McCandless, the same Alexander Supertramp, whose story became the basis for the book and film Into the Wild. McCandless died of exhaustion in Alaska, in an abandoned bus, unable to reach civilization due to a flooded river. However, the tent of the traveler who died in Big Cypress was only 8 kilometers from the nearest highway. He could easily have reached the road, but the strangest thing began when the police tried to establish the identity of the deceased. He had no phone, no documents, no bank cards. It turned out that he did not serve in either the army or the police. His photos, fingerprints, and DNA did not match any of the existing databases of American law enforcement agencies. Finally, in August 2018, the Florida police published a photofit of the deceased and photos of his equipment, with a request for help in identifying him. One of the first to respond to the ads was Kelly Fairbanks. She is a member of the Trail Angels community, people who provide hikers with overnight accommodations, showers, food, or transportation. Fairbanks met the mysterious traveler in January 2018 and even took a photo with him. The man told her that he was walking from New York to Key West, the southernmost point of Florida. He was using a paper map of the state. When Fairbanks suggested he download a travel app, he said he didn't have a smartphone. The unnamed tourist looked like a kind person, she said, and his eyes were young, despite his gray beard. Fairbanks posted a message about the man's search on Facebook. It turned out that he had interacted with many different people during his hike. The traveler told them about his love for Douglas Adams' books, and Doctor Who, carried a notebook with him, of which he wrote down codes for Screeps, an online game played by programmers. Reddit users even managed to reconstruct the traveler's approximate route. Harmless goes hiking. Ben Bellamy, as he introduced himself to other hikers, was first encountered on the Appalachian Trail in July 2017. One of his casual acquaintances said that Bellamy was new to hiking, but clearly enjoyed it. It is considered bad manners to come up with one yourself. It is much better to get it from another traveler. Bellamy went hiking in jeans. This is not the most suitable clothing for hiking, so he was sarcastically nicknamed Denim. According to another traveler, Denim told him that he lived in Brooklyn. More and more photos of Bellamy appeared online, but they still could not identify him. Another tourist wrote that he spent the night with this man at the end of the Appalachian Trail, and they talked about childhood. Denim complained about violence from his father. Because of this, He allegedly cut off all ties with his family. In the conversation, the traveler also recalled an ex-girlfriend and, possibly, a sister. Belemi loved science fiction, fantasy, and video games. And before the trip, he worked at some New York company. On December 1, 2017, Belemi walked into a mountain crossing store in northern Georgia. Store employee Matt Mason later said the hiker was asking him about directions to the Florida Keys. The man didn't have a smartphone, so Mason printed out 60 pages of maps for him. He thought the hiker's decision to sever ties with the digital world was a good one. The hiker was next spotted at the Alabama-Georgia border on December 29, 2017. Judging by the photos, he was in a great mood. On the Pinhoti Trail in the southern Appalachians, the hiker was given a new name, Mostly Harmless, a reference to Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series. Belemi encountered other hikers building a fire. They invited him to join them if he didn't bite, to which he replied that he was mostly harmless, which is what the other tourists began calling him. In January, Besney met Kelly Fairbanks, who worked at a store at a military base in Florida. At the Sand Pond campground on the Florida Trail, he met a woman, to whom he told her that he had been visiting his sister in Sarasota before going on the hike. Besney also mentioned his job in it and his health problems. He said he wanted to travel while he still could. Besney was next seen on March 12, 2018, at the 88 store near Ocala, Florida. On March 17, he was photographed in the Paisley area. Besney was never seen alive again. Someone definitely misses him. How they searched for a harmless. Thousands of internet users participated in the search for Harmless. The Facebook community dedicated to the mysterious tourist alone numbered 5.5 thousand people. Some analyzed notes with pieces of code from his notebooks. Others tried to reconstruct the chronology of his hike. There were versions that Ben Belemi was a boy who went missing back in 1982, or a criminal who killed a girl in Arkansas in 2017. The name Ben Belemi was also interpreted in different ways. For example, Wired journalist Nicholas Thompson was asked to read his name backwards. With a certain amount of imagination, Belemi turned out to be Why Me, Lib. Why Me, Liberal. Wired's article about Harmless was published in February 2020, at the beginning of the presidential campaign in the United States, so the appearance of such versions is partly natural. According to Thompson, Harmless interested the online community with his inconsistency. He followed the leave no trace tourism ethic to the letter and left no traces at all. He was not like most American tramps. Almost everyone he met noted his charm and good education. Harmless had good teeth, which meant he could afford expensive visits to the dentist. Someone definitely misses him. One of the founders of the Harmless search community on Facebook, Natasha Teasley, said later, the girl sent out leaflets with information about the tourist to New York, where he is believed to have started his journey, Sarasota and Saratoga, where the traveler allegedly visited his sister. In the summer of 2020, searchers decided to resort to the help of Arthrum, a company that searches for people by DNA. The founder of Arthrum became interested in the story of Harmless and offered to help the Florida police. The police refused to pay for the tests, which cost $5,000, but the necessary amount was raised by activists from Facebook. Arthrum was given a fragment of the traveler's bone. The DNA data was compared with the GEDmatch database, which, for example, helped find the Golden State Killer Joseph Dungello, who killed more than 10 people. But first, Besney was identified by photo. Brilliant programmer, abuser, victim of mental disorder. In mid-December 2020, a friend of Harmless contacted the Florida police, asking to be called Mary. She recognized the traveler's face and knew about the scar on his stomach. The handwriting in his notebook also seemed familiar to the girl. In life, Ben Belemi, Denim and Harmless were called Vance John Rodriguez. In January 2021, Arthrum confirmed that the deceased traveler's DNA, Rodriguez's mother. Rodriguez was born in February 1976 near Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He had a twin sister and an older brother. Years later, Rodriguez told friends that his father had seriously injured him as a child, but he did not go into detail about whether it was psychological or physical abuse. At the age of 15, Rodriguez attempted suicide. He took a gun, went out into a field and shot himself in the stomach. However, the teenager then apparently changed his mind and went out onto the highway, where he was picked up and taken to the hospital by a passing truck driver. This incident left him with a scar, by which Mary later identified him. After the suicide attempt, Rodriguez's parents sent him to a psychiatric clinic, but at 17, he proved his incapacity in court and moved out. According to Mary, he got angry at any mention of his parents. By the way, when the body was identified, Rodriguez's relatives refused to comment on the incident. After finishing school, Rodriguez entered the University of Southwestern Louisiana, now the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. There he became friends with classmate Randall Godso. They shared a room in the dorm and hung out together. Both were interested in computers, but Vance's passion went to extremes. He could play for 18 hours a day, doing nothing else. Vance had severe depressive episodes, Godso recalls. He was gloomy all his life, but we got along well. Rodriguez did not finish university, but thanks to his programming skills, he easily found a job as an engineer at Shopper's Choice in Baton Rouge. Colleagues remember him as the most talented specialist in the team. He was a brilliant programmer, but at the same time, he wrote extremely complex code. Working with Vance was like inviting Rembrandt to paint your bathroom, recalls Mary, who also works in tech. It would be good, but it would always be over the top. The more difficult the tasks, the better Rodriguez felt. He was quiet, but not so quiet that it seemed weird or threatening. Vance wasn't the type of person to show up to a party dressed as a clown and shoot people, recalls Rodriguez's former colleague Corey Tisdale. He always showed up to corporate events and didn't look miserable. Rodriguez ate one meal a day, dressed all in black, and wore his hair long. He later cut it and donated it to Locks of Love, a charity that makes wigs for children who are suffering from hair loss for one reason or another. He attended DragonCon, a convention dedicated to sci-fi, comics, board games, and computer games. It seems that Rodriguez suffered from a mental disorder. Mary and several of his friends recall that he had periods of shutdown, when he would lie 4 days without moving, eating or communicating. At the same time, he refused medical help. If he was sick, he would eat chocolate and wash it down with alcohol, the girl says. In Baton Rouge, Rodriguez started a relationship that lasted 5 years, but ended badly. Apartment, $950 a month. Utilities, $300 a month. 5 years of living with a monster who causes you mental and physical pain. Priceless, the girl wrote on her Facebook after the breakup. Later, her mother indicated that Rodriguez was so cruel to the girl that it affected her psyche. Rodriguez's former colleagues were saddened, but not particularly surprised by the news of his death. He was always very private and made dark jokes, says his former colleague Keith Parent. It's no wonder he withdrew from people. It's a shame he died. In mid-2017, I decided to bring Rodriguez on board to develop a mobile app for a client of mine, says former Shopper's Choice employee David Blazier. I was willing to pay anything, but I just couldn't find him. In 2013, Rodriguez moved to New York City. Before that, he had met a girl online named Kay, her real name being withheld due to the Nameless controversy, who was finishing college at the time. The couple would visit each other and eventually decide to move in together. Kay got a job in the fashion industry and needed to be in New York full-time, and Rodriguez, who had spent his entire life in Louisiana, was happy about the change. According to Kay, he was nice at first, but over time, he began to withdraw again. If something upset him, he would completely stop communicating. It's pretty hard in a small apartment, the girl recalls. Rodriguez worked remotely for Shopper's Choice for another year, and then quit and began living on his savings. He and Kay would go out about once a month, The girl recalls. When she asked if Vance wanted to go somewhere to travel, he would answer that he didn't need to go anywhere because he could look up photos on the internet. The hustle and bustle of New York seemed to put him in a stupor. I think he felt very lonely in this city, where there are so many people, but no one to make friends with, says Kay. Over time, the couple's already difficult relationship only worsened. He told me how he behaved with girls in previous relationships. It was time to run away already. Kay recalls. Despite her bad feelings, the girls still stayed with Rodriguez. In September 2016, Kay was injured in the Boston Marathon bombing. I had severe PTSD, but Vance was so annoyed that he had to take care of me. He even kept a journal of everything he did for me. He eventually threw me out on the street at night, knowing that in my condition, it would cause panic. And that wasn't the worst thing, the girl recalls. According to Kay, it was around this time that Rodriguez began threatening to publish her personal information if she left him. This sounds ironic, given the anonymity he was trying to achieve on his journey, and scary, given his programming skills. Either way, in the winter of 2016, the girl finally moved out. Godse recalls that during this period, his friend first started talking about suicide. In January 2017, Rodriguez wrote, "I'm mostly harmless for now," in a Screeps chat room. He left his last messages in the room in April, then went on a trip. 8 months later, the landlord of Rodriguez's apartment broke down the door and found his ID, wallet, and bank cards inside. There was rotten food in the refrigerator. It looked like Rodriguez had left in a hurry. Rodriguez spent the next 15 months walking south. There was nothing about him that betrayed his former gloom and cruelty. According to friends who saw photos of him on the trip, he looked happier than ever. He was constantly smiling. The people he met along the way liked him. Could Rodriguez have become a different person? When we first met, he seemed nice, but in close relationships, he turned out to be an abuser. Kay recalls. Tourists could hardly know how he went through difficult periods in his life. Maybe he was good at hiding the personality that showed up with me and other girls. It's sad that he was so charming with strangers, but couldn't even behave decently with me. There was simply no one to look for Vance Rodriguez. He didn't have a job. He didn't communicate with his family. His ex-girlfriends were afraid of him, and old friends got used to his periodic disappearances. Everyone thought he would come back, says Mary. Why couldn't Harmless get out of the forest? Why did Rodriguez go on his hike? And why did he die? There is almost no information about how he spent the last months of his hike and life. It seems he was starving, perhaps in the same place where his body was found in July 2018. What could have happened? Friends of the deceased believe that he switched off again, this time for good. Every time he had problems, he would just lie down and sleep, recalls Kay. I think that's what happened this time. He ignored the problem until it went away on its own. The second question is more difficult. Why did Rodriguez go on a hike at all? Most likely, it is much easier to accept yourself in nature. Nothing distracts, no phone, no computer, and you can realize how small each of us is compared to nature. Exhale and relax. Rodriguez felt bad in the big and strange New York. He could not build healthy relationships. He abandoned his home, then walked through the mountains and forests and probably managed to tame his demons. The most interesting thing about solving mysteries is the process itself. Building and testing hypotheses. Reality can be much more prosaic and sad. Thousands of people wanted to find the Harmless family, but it turned out that Vance Rodriguez was an outcast in it. Natasha Teasley was sure that someone missed this guy, but many hated him. You'll find reasons not to like me. Rodriguez commented on one of his moves in Screeps 2 months before leaving everyone forever. And he was right. One way or another, the story of Harmless united thousands of people, and some of them took up investigating other missing persons cases. This story showed how accurate DNA analysis can be. Finally, it reminded that even in the modern world, with its surveillance cameras and ubiquitous data collection, you can disappear almost without a trace. But it's hard to see Rodriguez's story as anything other than sad. The boy who tried to commit suicide in a Louisiana field because his parents were abusing him grew up to be the man who died alone in a Florida swamp. The man who was able to run away from the world because no one was looking for him. The man who was hurt and then went into the woods and became mostly harmless.
Subscribe to the YouTube channel.